The scent was the first thing Emily Collins noticed. It began as a faint, unpleasant odor that lingered on the edge of her awareness, like the distant echo of something forgotten. But as the days wore on, the smell grew more insistent, more repugnant, an ever-present reminder of something profoundly wrong within the walls of Collins Manor. Everwood was a town caught between the delicate balance of picturesque charm and creeping obsolescence. Its streets, lined with Victorian houses and overgrown gardens, spoke of a time when the town was the heart of industry and ambition. Now, it was a quiet, almost eerie place where history seemed to whisper through the cracks of its crumbling facades. Collins Manor, a once grand home now shrouded in decay, stood at the town's edge like a solemn sentinel of the past. Emily had inherited the house from a great aunt she barely knew. With dreams of escaping the bustling city life and focusing on her writing, she had eagerly embraced the opportunity. The house was an imposing structure with its intricate woodwork and faded grandeur, but Emily was undeterred. She saw it as a refuge, a place where she could finally carve out her own space and perhaps uncover some hidden stories within her family's history. The first night in the manor was filled with the typical creaks and groans of an old house settling into its foundations. But as Emily tried to sleep, she found herself increasingly disturbed by a pervasive, rotten smell that seemed to seep into every corner of her room. She blamed it on the age of the house, convinced it was just the dampness and dust mingling in the air. Yet, as the days went by, the stench grew more foul, a constant presence that refused to be ignored. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of unpacking and organizing, Emily stood in the dimly lit kitchen, trying to pinpoint the source of the smell. She opened cabinets, peered behind appliances, and even checked the trash bin, all to no avail. The odor clung to her, as if it were an invisible entity stalking her every step. As night fell, the smell seemed to intensify, becoming almost unbearable. Emily sat at her kitchen table, the stench wrapping around her like a shroud. She knew she had to do something. The thought of the house's history, of who had lived here before, gnawed at her curiosity and unease. The following day, Emily began to investigate the house's past. Her inquiries around town led her to Oliver Marston, a local historian who had a reputation for knowing every detail of Everwood's history. Oliver was an elderly man with a kind face and an air of quiet wisdom. When Emily mentioned the odor and her concerns, his expression grew somber. "There are stories," Oliver began, his voice low and measured, "about this house and its previous occupants. Strange stories, dark stories. You might want to be careful." Emily pressed him for more details, but Oliver remained vague, offering only hints and half-formed warnings. Undeterred, Emily returned to the manor with a renewed sense of determination. That evening, as she explored the dimly lit rooms, she stumbled upon a hidden door beneath a large, faded rug in the library. The door creaked open to reveal a steep staircase leading down into darkness. The air was cooler here, heavy with the scent of old wood and mold. Emily hesitated for a moment, but her curiosity overpowered her fear. She descended into the basement, her flashlight casting erratic shadows on the walls. The basement was a cavernous space, filled with old furniture, dust-covered relics, and cobwebs. In the far corner, she discovered a wooden trunk, intricately carved with symbols she did not recognize. Her heart pounded as she opened it, revealing a collection of old journals, photographs, and strange artifacts. Among the journals, one stood out with its faded leather cover. As Emily flipped through its pages, she uncovered disturbing details about the house's former occupant, Ezekiel Graves, a man who was rumored to have conducted occult rituals in the basement. The photographs showed dark ceremonies, grimacing figures and symbols that matched those on the trunk. The entries in the journal described rituals performed to summon and control dark entities, feeding off fear and despair. Emily's blood ran cold as she read about Graves's final sinister ritual. According to the journals, he had vanished mysteriously, leaving behind only whispers of his dark deeds. The basement had been sealed off, the house abandoned, and the truth buried with him. The stench that now plagued Emily was not just a remnant of the past, but a manifestation of Graves' malevolent spirit, trapped and hungry for new victims. As the days passed, the presence grew more aggressive. Emily began to see shadows moving in the corners of her vision, hear whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, and experience chilling drops in temperature. The stench was now a constant, nauseating presence, suffusing the air with its foulness. Desperation drove Emily to seek Oliver's help again. When she shared her discoveries, his face turned pale. "I was hoping you'd never find those journals," he admitted. "Graves's spirit is a powerful one. It feeds on the fear and despair of those who come near. You need to get out of that house before it consumes you." But leaving was not an option for Emily. The house, with its dark history and its hold on her sanity, had become a prison of sorts. She resolved to confront the spirit directly, to uncover the truth behind the stench and the shadows. In a final, desperate attempt, Emily performed a ritual she found in the journals, hoping to sever the spirit's hold on the house. The ritual was perilous, requiring her to confront her deepest fears and face the malevolent presence head-on. As she chanted the incantations, the air grew colder, and the shadows around her twisted and writhed. The confrontation was harrowing. Ezekiel Graves's spirit manifested in a grotesque form, his eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. Emily's courage wavered, but she pressed on, completing the ritual and casting the spirit out. The stench grew unbearable, and for a moment, Emily feared she would be overwhelmed. But as the ritual neared its end, the presence began to recede, and the oppressive weight in the air lifted. The basement fell silent, and the smell began to dissipate. Emily emerged from the darkness, exhausted but victorious. The house was no longer plagued by the stench of shadows, and the malevolent spirit of Ezekiel Graves was gone. In the aftermath, Emily chose to remain in Collins Manor, transforming it into a place of quiet reflection and writing. The house, once a source of terror, became a sanctuary for her creative endeavors. The dark secrets of its past were now laid to rest, and the stench of shadows had finally been banished. Emily's experience left her deeply changed, but she found solace in her newfound peace, and in the stories she would write about her harrowing ordeal. The manor, though forever marked by its dark history, stood as a testament to her bravery and resilience. William Turner had always prided himself on his ability to solve problems. As a software developer, he thrived on logic, precision, and the thrill of unraveling complex codes. But the problem he faced in his new apartment was one that defied all rational explanation. It began with a faint, unpleasant odor, a putrid, decaying smell that seemed to seep into his apartment from nowhere. At first, William dismissed it as a quirk of the newly renovated building. Perhaps it was residual construction dust or some other minor inconvenience. But as days turned into weeks, the odor grew stronger, more nauseating, and more persistent. It appeared at the most inopportune times, lingering in his apartment like a malevolent presence. The Dominion, where William had recently moved, was an upscale high-rise in a rapidly gentrifying part of Metropolis. The building had been refurbished with modern amenities, its exterior a sleek facade of glass and steel. The apartments were stylish, with polished hardwood floors and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered stunning views of the city. William's own apartment on the 14th floor was no exception, spacious, clean, and seemingly perfect. Yet despite the apartment's apparent perfection, something was terribly wrong. The odor, like a foul ghost from the past, seemed to cling to the very fabric of the place. William tried to ignore it, blaming the renovation work or perhaps a minor plumbing issue. But as the smell grew more intense, he couldn't ignore it any longer. Determined to find an explanation, William began investigating the building's history. His inquiries led him to Karen Morris, the building manager, who was friendly but evasive when questioned about any previous incidents. "The building's history is pretty straightforward," Karen said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "A few minor issues here and there, but nothing out of the ordinary." Frustrated, William turned to the local library, where he found old records and newspaper clippings about the Dominion. The information was sparse, but he discovered a troubling pattern. Several residents from the past had vanished without a trace. The disappearances were never solved, and the cases were quietly closed, leaving behind only unanswered questions. One name kept recurring in the articles: Eleanor Hart. Eleanor had been a prominent socialite, known for her extravagant parties and mysterious aura. Her disappearance, 2 decades earlier, was the most baffling of all. The articles hinted at her involvement in occult practices and whispered rumors about dark rituals conducted in the building. The more William delved into Eleanor's story, the more he felt the weight of the building's dark past pressing down on him. The stench in his apartment grew more unbearable, and strange occurrences began to plague him. Unexplained noises, cold drafts, and shadows that seemed to move on their own. Desperate for answers, William reached out to a local historian and paranormal expert, Dr. Evelyn Carter. Dr. Carter was a no-nonsense scholar with a deep knowledge of the city's hidden history and supernatural lore. When William described his experiences and the building's history, her interest piqued. "The smell you describe," Dr. Carter said, her expression grave, "is a classic sign of a malevolent presence. Eleanor Hart's spirit is likely tied to that apartment. The disappearances, the rituals, there's something dark and powerful at work here." With Dr. Carter's guidance, William began to piece together the puzzle. He learned that Eleanor's disappearance had been linked to a series of occult practices she had conducted in the apartment. The rituals were said to summon dark entities and bind them to the living world, feeding off fear and despair. Eleanor's spirit, bound to the apartment's past, had been waiting for someone to uncover the truth. As the supernatural events escalated, William's sense of reality began to blur. The stench grew more overpowering, and the apartment seemed to shift and change, its shadows darkening and closing in. He experienced vivid, nightmarish visions of Eleanor's last days, her face twisted in rage and despair. In a climactic confrontation, William faced Eleanor's spirit directly. The apartment's atmosphere was thick with an otherworldly chill as he performed a ritual based on Dr. Carter's guidance. The ritual was perilous, requiring William to confront his deepest fears and confront the vengeful spirit head-on. The final moments of the ritual were a battle of wills, with Eleanor's spirit manifesting in a grotesque, spectral form. William's resolve was tested as he faced the full force of her malevolent rage. The stench was almost unbearable, and the apartment seemed to pulsate with a life of its own. With a final, desperate incantation, William completed the ritual. The malevolent presence began to recede, the stench dissipating as the oppressive weight lifted from the apartment. Eleanor's spirit was cast out, and the building fell silent once more. William emerged from the ordeal, exhausted but victorious. The apartment, once a place of dread, was now free from the foul echoes of its past. The Dominion, though forever marked by its dark history, stood as a testament to William's bravery and resilience. In the aftermath, William chose to remain in the apartment, now a quiet and peaceful refuge. The stench and the dark memories had been laid to rest, and he found solace in the knowledge that he had confronted and overcome the darkness that once haunted his home. The city continued its bustling life outside, but within the Dominion, William had found a sense of peace and closure. The story of the foul echoes serves as a chilling reminder that the past never truly dies. It lingers, waiting for someone to uncover its secrets and confront the darkness that remains. Sarah Winters stood at the edge of the overgrown driveway, her eyes scanning the dilapidated farmhouse that had recently become her new home. The house, with its peeling paint and sagging roof, seemed to embody the quiet charm of country living she had always longed for. After years of city life, the promise of solitude and a fresh start had been irresistible. Little did she know, the tranquility of her new life was about to be shattered by an unsettling presence. The first sign of trouble came soon after Sarah moved in. At first, it was a faint, sour odor that seemed to drift through the house at random intervals. Sarah tried to ignore it, attributing it to the age of the house or perhaps some hidden mold. But as the days went by, the smell grew stronger, more putrid, and more persistent. It was as though a rancid cloud hung over her home, following her from room to room. Determined to find the source of the smell, Sarah began her investigation. She started with the basement, a dark, musty space filled with old furniture and forgotten belongings. The odor was strongest here, and Sarah's search led her to a corner of the basement that had been boarded up for years. With effort, she removed the boards and uncovered a hidden room, its entrance obscured by cobwebs and dust. Inside, Sarah found a trove of old, yellowed documents, faded photographs, and peculiar artifacts. The room was a chaotic jumble of remnants from a past she had never known. Among the items were journals belonging to Elias Winters, her distant relative, who had once owned the farmhouse. The journals spoke of dark rituals and occult practices, of a family torn apart by their own sins. The more Sarah read, the more she realized that the house's foul smell was a manifestation of the malevolent force tied to Elias's legacy. The local villagers, when approached, were reticent about the farmhouse's history. Their cryptic comments hinted at something terrible, but avoided direct confrontation. One elderly woman, Mrs. Hawkins, finally broke her silence. "The Winters family," she said in a hushed tone, "were into things they shouldn't have been. The house, well, it remembers, and it's not forgiving." As Sarah delved deeper into Elias Winters' past, she uncovered a disturbing truth. Elias had been a prominent occultist in the late 19th century, known for his experiments with dark forces. His rituals had gone awry, leading to the deaths of several family members and his own disappearance under mysterious circumstances. The farmhouse had become a place of suffering and despair, with the spirits of Elias's victims trapped by the dark magic he had unleashed. The odor that plagued Sarah was more than a physical phenomenon. It was a supernatural manifestation of Elias's restless spirit, fueled by the sins and unresolved guilt of his past. The smell grew increasingly unbearable, and Sarah experienced a series of supernatural disturbances, cold drafts, eerie whispers, and flickering lights. In her desperation, Sarah sought the help of a local historian and paranormal expert, Dr. Henry Lawson. Dr. Lawson explained that the only way to free the spirits and rid the house of its curse was to perform a ritual to atone for Elias's sins and release the trapped souls. The ritual required confronting the spirit of Elias and resolving the issues that bound him to the farmhouse. With Dr. Lawson's guidance, Sarah prepared for the ritual. The night was filled with an oppressive silence as she conducted the ceremony in the hidden room. The air was thick with a palpable sense of dread as Elias's spirit manifested, a shadowy, malevolent presence that seemed to ooze anger and despair. The ritual was a harrowing ordeal, with the spirit's rage manifesting as violent disturbances and chilling apparitions. In the climactic confrontation, Sarah faced Elias's spirit, her fear matched only by her determination to end the nightmare. The ritual reached its climax as Sarah, chanting the incantations, confronted Elias directly. The house shook and the smell became almost unbearable, but Sarah pressed on, her resolve unwavering. With a final, desperate invocation, the ritual was completed. Elias's spirit, racked with fury and sorrow, began to fade, the oppressive odor dissipating as the malevolent force was expelled. The farmhouse fell silent, its atmosphere lighter and more peaceful. The curse had been lifted, and the restless spirits of the Winters family were finally free. Sarah emerged from the ordeal, exhausted but relieved. The farmhouse, once a place of dread and darkness, was now a haven of peace. The stench and the dark memories had been laid to rest, and Sarah found solace in the knowledge that she had confronted and overcome the legacy of her ancestors. The Reeking Legacy serves as a chilling reminder of the weight of past sins and the haunting nature of unresolved guilt. Through Sarah's journey, the story explores how the shadows of the past can linger, influencing the present and demanding resolution. The farmhouse stands as a testament to the power of confronting and resolving the dark legacies that bind us to our past. Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey through the macabre. We hope these tales of fear and mystery have left you with a lingering sense of dread. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more spine-tingling content, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, remember, the darkness holds many secrets, and some should never be uncovered. Stay safe and keep your lights on.